So the question is, do I modify VO2 interval duration at altitude, being over 5,000 feet versus sea level? So as a general rule, no, I don't. But this question kind of got me thinking, because we know VO2 is lower at altitude, and I'll link to a study here, but it's generally on the order of kind of 1 to 2% per 1,000 feet above 5,000 feet, which is a pretty similar decline to FTP. And this question got me thinking about whether it takes longer to reach VO2 max at altitude. If the goal of VO2 max workout is to spend time at VO2 max, it does stand to reason that interval duration should be modified to that end if it does take longer to reach VO2 max. So when I'm writing VO2 max training, I'm kind of looking at an athlete's specific physiology in terms of how long it takes them to reach VO2 max. They're not hooked up to a gas exchange machine. So I'm inferring that largely by heart rate, maybe from their kind of subjective feedback about how hard they're breathing. In terms of, I'm looking at how long they can stay there, how repeatable those efforts are. I'm looking at their goal events, what the requirements will be, the recommendations from WKO5, which are proprietary. So I don't have those formulas for what WKO5 is recommending for VO2 workouts. I'm, also just like general knowledge about where this person trains, both in terms of elevation and the terrain that they have available, and then also the elevation for their target event. But so what this question got me thinking about is whether those data recommendations that I'm using from WKO5, if those are determined in some way by altitude, and which I have to assume that they are, because WKO5, the model that it's going to give me for recommendations for VO2 max training, those are going to be based on the data that's going into WKO5, which, if somebody lives at altitude, that's going to be impacted. The data going in is going to be impacted by that elevation. And so it stands to reason that the data coming out would also be impacted. So when I utilize the data from WKO5, I am interpreting through that lens, like, where did the peak power numbers come from in terms of elevation? So yeah, does it take longer to reach VO2 max at altitude? So I did look for research in this area. I didn't find a study that really answered the question in a satisfactory way for me, but I think it does. So given that, it is going to be harder to spend the same amount of time at VO2 max in any given workout. I looked at a review that examined the individual response to training at altitude, and their ultimate conclusion was that more studies are needed in this area to evaluate individual response. But what that tells me is that it is individual. So the short answer is I don't know. I write the training based on the information and the models that I have, which are going to be impacted by elevation, for an athlete's training. I don't know that I would do this kind of as a matter of course, but it also made me wonder, are you asking this because you think that it should be, whether the intervals should be shorter or longer? And I guess I'm curious kind of what is making you think that it should be. But yeah, the short answer is I'm not sure, but it was kind of fun to poke around and see if I could get any information, which I'm not sure.